This is Yair Pinto with Boots on the Ground, bringing you a special broadcast from the speech of Israel's Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. He will stand against the flood of lies and empty statements from countries that lecture us, Israel, while we defend ourselves from murderous Islamist terrorist groups. The Prime Minister landed in New York on Thursday, and from there, he will begin a series of meetings and diplomatic events that will peak with his 14th address to the United Nations General Assembly. While the official schedule has not yet been published, key stops on his visit are known from a source familiar with the details. So what does the United Nations leaders and this week looks like? It's wild. Over the last few days, Israel has been part of every speech at the United Nations. 157 countries recognized a Palestinian state. How will Netanyahu respond in his United Nations speech? After the recognition event for a Palestinian state initiated by Saudi Arabia and France, and after President Trump's meeting with Arab leaders, Netanyahu will speak at the United Nations in a few minutes, and we will bring you the full report and the entire speech live here on TBN Israel. The likely main line will be a sharp attack on the countries that announced recognition of a Palestinian state, recognition that most of them did not condition on Hamas surrendering and returning the hostages. So, I'm Yair Pinto with Boots on the Ground, reporting what is happening in Israel. And this is day 721 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq, and the terrorist organizations in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And today, we bring you all the truth about what's happening at the United Nations General Assembly. So 1 second before we start, it's very important, leave a comment, hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel to get all the truth in real time. So against the backdrop of a wave of recognition of a Palestinian state by Western countries led by France and Britain, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu flew on Thursday to the United States. Very soon, he is expected to deliver a speech at the United Nations General Assembly, and on Monday to also meet with the United States President Donald Trump for the 4th time since Trump took office last January. The two are expected to discuss responses and steps to the recognition move by all these countries, the deal with Hamas in Gaza, and contacts for an agreement with Syria. On Monday, France, Malta, Luxembourg, Monaco, Andorra, and San Marino announced official recognition of a Palestinian state. French President Emmanuel Macron said that recognition of a Palestinian state is the only thing that will allow Israel to continue to exist in security, and added that he intends to open a Palestinian embassy after a ceasefire arrangement is reached and the hostages are released. Palestinian Authority President Abu Mazen also delivered a recorded speech. He thanked Macron on behalf of the state of Palestine and added, "This is the start of an irreversible path to end the humanitarian crisis and end the occupation, and to establish a Palestinian state with its capital in East Jerusalem that lives alongside Israel in peace. We strive for a modern democratic state based on the rule of law, pluralism, separations of powers, equality, justice, and the empowerment of women and youth." This is according to Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president of at least half of the Palestinians, not the ones that are staying in Gaza, that are under Hamas. And Netanyahu responded sharply and said that the shameful surrender of some leaders to Palestinian terror will not bind Israel in any way. A Palestinian state will not be established. The Prime Minister's office noted that Israel is examining diplomatic steps against the countries that led this move. Among other things, the possibility of closing French offices in Jerusalem is being considered. The special envoy to the President of the United States to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, said today that there is a real possibility of diplomatic progress in the Gaza issue. I am full of hope that in the coming days we can announce a breakthrough, he noted, adding that President Trump presented last night during his meeting with Arab leaders in New York a 21-point plan aimed at advancing peace in the Middle East and also in Gaza. Witkoff's remarks came against the background of a report in the El Arabiya channel, according to which the American administration is expected to present a new plan to end the war in the Gaza Strip. According to the report, the proposal includes 4 main steps: stopping the fighting, releasing the hostages, a gradual Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and the entry of humanitarian aid through international actors. Diplomatic contacts with Syria are also being discussed, and according to some reports, during the Prime Minister's diplomatic visit to the United States, the idea was raised to hold a 3-way meeting between him, the Syrian President El-Julani, and President Donald Trump of the United States. But reports arriving in recent hours indicate that the Syrian president and his entourage have left New York, and therefore it appears the meeting will not take place. The Prime Minister's office responded this evening to El-Julani's speech at the United Nations and the contacts for a security agreement and confirmed that negotiations with Syria are underway. The statement said that the conclusion of the contacts is conditioned on securing Israel's security interests, including the demilitarization of southern Syria and protection of the Druze community, a minority in Syria. Netanyahu rejected reports about possibly giving up territory in the Golan Heights and called them nonsense. So keep spreading the truth, and in this live broadcast, in just a few minutes, we will bring you a live video from the General Assembly, the United Nations General Assembly, the speech of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. So stay with us and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So the Prime Minister emphasized 3 main goals that he will be presenting in this meeting. 1 is the return of all the hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip. 2 is the defeat of the Hamas terrorist organization. 3 is expanding the circle of peace, a move that he says is made possible thanks to recent victories, including Operation Lion's Heart. Rising Lion, remember this operation? Am Kelavi. The diplomatic jury is taking place at a very sensitive time, with international efforts behind the scenes for recognition of a Palestinian state, while the government in Israel is fundamentally opposing this move. Leaders Week in the United Nations opened at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday in New York, with a significant block of leaders choosing to focus on the war in the Gaza Strip and the hostages. The UN Secretary General called for a permanent ceasefire and the immediate release of all the hostages. Trump attacked the recognition of a Palestinian state. On the other hand, the Emir of Qatar accused Israel of deliberately sabotaging the negotiations, and Erdogan of Turkey spoke of genocide in Gaza. The leaders of Jordan and Qatar warned against continued destruction and delays in a political solution. US President Donald Trump met with the leaders of Arab states at the end, and he called a very good meeting after meeting with them and noted that the next step is a meeting with Israel, meaning he's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu next Monday. Ahead of the meeting, he said, "I stand with Israel as I have all my life. And the meeting that I will hold shortly is perhaps one of the most important ones. We need to solve this, release the hostages, and end the war." Trump will present in the meeting his plan for the Gaza Strip for the day after. The Emir of Qatar thanked Trump at the start of the conversation and noted, "The reason we are here is to end the war and return the hostages, and we are here to do everything that we can for that." In the meeting, Trump is now conferring with leaders of the following countries: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan. Trump sits at the head of the table with the other leaders seated on both sides. Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff also sat beside him. "This is a very important meeting for me," Trump said, "because we are going to add something that, in fact, you may never even have started." The assembly opened with a speech by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who warned that the levels of destruction in the Gaza Strip are amongst the greatest in all my years as Secretary General. He condemned the October 7 terrorist attacks and called for the release of all the hostages, but clarified nothing justifies collective punishment of the Palestinians. Guterres demanded a permanent ceasefire, the release of all the hostages, and the entry of humanitarian aid now. He also mentioned the wars in Ukraine and Sudan and called on states to clarify their commitment to international law. United States President Donald Trump delivered a harsh speech in which he claimed that recognition of a Palestinian state is a prize for Hamas for the atrocities that it committed. He said, "I must solve the Gaza issue," but stressed Hamas rejects reasonable offers for peace. There are those at the United Nations who want to give Hamas a prize in the form of a Palestinian state. Trump repeated his call to return the hostages. "We want all 20 back. We don't want 2 or 4. We don't want 2 or 4. We want also the 38 bodies now." However, it seems that Trump again threw out unbased numbers regarding the hostages, and at this stage, it is known that 28 hostages are not alive anymore. And of course, the Arab states condemned and tried to explain why Israel is the bad guy. The Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, accused Israel of directly harming mediation efforts. The negotiations with the delegations, and then planned also to eliminate the members of that delegation, according to Emir of Qatar. He called Israel's strike in Doha on September 9 a treacherous attack meant to foil the negotiations and continue the war. Describing the goal that, in his words, the Israeli government seeks, the Emir said, if the price of releasing the hostages is stopping the war, then the Israeli government has given up on their release. The real goal of the Israeli government is to destroy the Gaza Strip so that it will not be possible to live there, to work there, to study there, and to provide care. This is the preparation of the expulsion of the Strip's residents. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan sharply attacked Israel and claimed that genocide is being carried out in the Gaza Strip. He showed footage from Gaza in the hall and said, "The world is witnessing dangerous events where genocide continues. Israel kills a child in Gaza every hour." According to him, what is happening in the Gaza Strip is not a war on terror, but forced displacement and genocide. He also attacked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally. Netanyahu does not care about the hostages. And Jordan and Egypt also came out against us. But now, in the coming hours, Netanyahu will go up to speak and afterwards meet with Trump. So 1 second before we move on to the speech, keep spreading the truth, share, follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground and know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We are in a war for the truth. Every day, terrible lies are being spread about what's happening in Israel. So we need to tell as many people as possible what's happening here on the ground. If you want to help us, hit that subscribe button, share this video with anybody who wants to know the truth about Israel. And now, in just a few minutes, we will hear Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speak. So let's go to the United Nations General Assembly.
Order. The 10th plenary meeting of the General Assembly is called to order. The Assembly will continue its consideration of Agenda Item 8 entitled general debate. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Please, order in the hall. 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 Please, order in the hall, and please be seated. Please, order in the hall.
Mr. President, the families of our dear hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, last year I stood at this podium and I showed this map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. You remember those beepers, the pagers? We paged Hezbollah. And believe me, they got the message. And thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. We destroyed Assad's armaments in Syria. We deterred Iran's Shiite militias in Iraq. And most importantly, And above anything else that I could say to you or that we did in this past year, in this past decade, we devastated Iran's atomic weapons and ballistic missiles programs. So here's where things stand today. Half the Houthi leadership in Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top atomic bomb scientists, well, they're gone too. Israel's 12-day war with Iran, which I renamed Operation Rising Lion, that's from the Bible. This 12-day war will go down in the annals of military history. Our daring pilots neutralized Iran's missile defenses and took control of the skies over Tehran. And you saw this. Israeli fighter pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action. President Trump and I promised to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and we delivered on that promise. We removed an existential threat to Israel, and a mortal threat to the civilized world. We lifted a dark cloud that could have claimed millions and millions of lives. But, ladies and gentlemen, we must remain vigilant. We must remain absolutely clear-minded and vigilant. We must not allow Iran to rebuild its military nuclear capacities. Iran's stockpiles of enriched uranium, these stockpiles must be eliminated. And tomorrow, UN Security Council sanctions on Iran must be snapped back. Thanks to the resolve of our people, the courage of our soldiers, and the bold decisions we took, Israel rebounded from its darkest day to deliver one of the most stunning military comebacks in history. But we're not done yet. The final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job. That is why we want to do so as fast as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the world no longer remembers October 7th. But we remember. Israel remembers October 7th. On that day, well, I'll tell you, you can remember October 7th too. You see this large pin here? It's a QR code. What I ask you to do is hold up your phones, zoom in, and you too will see why we fight and why we must win. It's all in here. On October 7th, Hamas carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered 1,200 innocent people, including over 40 Americans and foreign nationals from dozens of countries represented here. They beheaded men, They raped women. They burnt babies alive. They burnt babies alive in front of their parents. What monsters. And these monsters took more than 250 people hostage. And those included Holocaust survivors, grandmothers and their grandchildren. Who takes hostage grandmothers and grandchildren? Hamas does. So far, we've brought home 207 of these hostages, but 48 still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. 20 of them are alive, starved, tortured, deprived of any daylight, deprived of humanity. These are the names of the 20 living hostages. Matan Angrest, Gali and Zerv Berman, brothers, Elkanah Buchbot, Rom Braslavsky, Nimrod Cohen, Ariel and David Cunyo, another pair of brothers, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Eviatar David. You saw the picture of Eviatar David, emaciated, forced to dig his own grave. Maxim Herkin, Eitan Horn, Segev Kalfon, Bar Kuperstein, Omri Meran, Eitan Moore, Yosef Chaim Ochana, Alon Ohel, Avinatam Or, and Matan Tsengarker. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message. And I'll say it first in Hebrew and then in English. אחינו הגיבורים, מדבר ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו. אני פונה עליכם מעל בימת האו"ם. לא שכחנו אתכם, אפילו לא לשנייה. העם כולו איתכם, ואנחנו לא נשקוט ולא נרפה עד שנחזיר את כולכם הביתה. החיים והחללים כאחד. Our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter and we will not rest until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried. They're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hamas agrees to our demands, the war could end right now. Gaza would be demilitarized, Israel would retain overriding security control, and a peaceful civilian authority would be established by Gazans and others committed to peace with Israel. And of course, you understand that the war in Gaza has affected every Israeli. But I'm sure there are people in New York or in London or in Melbourne and elsewhere who are probably thinking, what does all of this have to do with me? And the answer is everything. Because our enemies are your enemies. So let's do something else, so first at the UN. Let's do a pop quiz. And raise your hand if you know the answer. Here's the first question. Who shouts death to America? Is it A, Iran, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, the Houthis, or E, all of the above? All of the above. Correct. All of the above. Second question. Who has murdered Americans and Europeans in cold blood? Is it A, Al-Qaeda, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, Iran, or E, all of the above? Correct. Again. So here's the point I wanted to make. Our enemies hate all of us with equal venom. They want to drag the modern world back to the past, to a dark age of violence, fanaticism, and terror. I think many of you are already feeling in your own societies the radical Islamist surge. You know, I'm sure you do, you know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. So I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us privately thank us. They tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force intelligence, once said, "If the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. He said, Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us. President Trump understands better than any other leader that Israel and America face a common threat. He showed the world that when Iran and its proxies murder Americans, take Americans hostage, shout death to America, burn American flags, and try to assassinate the President of the United States, not once, but twice. He showed them there is a price to pay for all that. But regrettably, many leaders who are represented in this hall, they send a very different message. Sure, in the days immediately following October 7th, many of them supported Israel. But that support quickly evaporated when Israel did what any self-respecting nation would do in the wake of such a savage attack. We fought back. Now just imagine, just sit back for a second and imagine an attack against America proportioned to the attack against Israel on October 7th. Imagine a regime, a terror regime, dispatching thousands of terrorists to invade the United States. They massacre 40,000 Americans. They take 10,000 Americans hostage. What do you think America would do? You think America would leave that regime standing? You don't think that. No way, not a chance. The United States would wipe out that terror regime and ensure that such savagery would never threaten America again. This is precisely what Israel is doing in Gaza. We're wiping out the terror regime of Hamas and ensuring that this savagery will never threaten Israel again. That's what we are doing. That's what any self-respecting government would do. Yet, and it's a yet that I'm sorry to say here, yet over time, many world leaders buckled. They buckled under the pressure of a biased media, radical Islamist constituencies, and anti-Semitic mobs. There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. And here's the shameful result of that collapse. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us. You condemn us, you embargo us, and you wage political and legal warfare, it's called lawfare, against us. I say to the representatives of those nations, this is not an indictment of Israel. It's an indictment of you. It's an indictment of weak-kneed leaders who appease evil rather than support a nation whose brave soldiers guard you from the barbarians at the gate. They're already penetrating your gates. When will you learn? You can't appease your way out of jihad, and you won't escape the Islamist storm by sacrificing Israel. To overcome that storm, you have to stand with Israel. But that's not what you're doing. As the prophets of Israel foretold in the Bible, you've turned good into evil and evil into good. Now I want to drill down on this. Take the false charge of genocide. Israel is accused of deliberately targeting civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite is true. The head of urban warfare studies, Colonel John Spencer, he's perhaps the world's greatest expert on urban warfare. And he says, Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. And because we're doing that, the ratio of non-combatant to combatant casualties is less than 2 to 1 in Gaza. That's an astoundingly low ratio, lower than NATO's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially when you consider that Gaza is one of the most densely populated urban areas on Earth. It has hundreds of miles of terror tunnels underground, and it has countless terror towers above ground, and thousands of terrorists embedded in the tunnels and in these towers in civilian areas. If you want to see what measures Israel takes to avoid civilian casualties in this war, just look at what we're doing now in Gaza City, the last Hamas stronghold, one of the 2 last strongholds. For 3 weeks, Israel dropped millions of leaflets, sent millions of text messages, and made countless phone calls urging civilians to leave Gaza City before our military moves in. At the same time, Hamas implants itself in mosques, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, and tries to force those civilians not to leave, to stay in harm's way. And it often threatens them at gunpoint if they try to do so. For Israel, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. Hamas uses civilians as human shields and as props in its sick propaganda war in Israel, against Israel, a propaganda war that the Western media buys hook, line, and sinker. Now, despite Hamas's threats, close to 700,000 Gazans, almost 750,000, have already heeded our calls and moved to safe zones. Now I want to ask you a simple question, a simple, logical question. Would a country committing genocide plead with the civilian population it is supposedly targeting to get out of harm's way? Would we tell them, get out, if we want to commit genocide? We're trying to get them out. And Hamas is trying to keep them in. And this charge is so baseless. The comparison to genocide, wholesale slaughter of populations. What, did the Nazis ask the Jews to leave, kindly leave, go out? Did others, you want me to name all the genocidal leaders of history? Just go one by one. Did anyone do this? Did they say, get out so we can come in? Of course not. So the truth has been turned on its head. Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization whose charter calls for the murder of all Jews on the planet, this genocidal organization is given a pass. It's barely mentioned. While Israel, which does everything it can to get civilians out of harm's way, Israel is put in the dock. What a joke. You want to hear another one? Israel is accused of deliberately starving the people of Gaza when Israel is deliberately feeding the people of Gaza. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let into Gaza more than 2 million tons of food and aid. That's 1 ton of aid for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. Nearly 3,000 calories per person per day. Some starvation policy. If there are Gazans who don't have enough food, it's because Hamas is stealing it. Hamas steals it, hoards it, and sells it at exorbitant prices to fight its war machine. Last month, even the UN, not exactly a supporter of Israel. You're supposed to laugh, by the way. Last month, even the UN admitted that Hamas and other armed groups looted 85% of the trucks. That's why you have deprivation. Those who peddled the blood libels of genocide and starvation against Israel are no better than those who peddled blood libels against the Jews in the Middle Ages when they falsely accused us of poisoning wells, spreading plague, and using the blood of children to bake Passover matzahs. Anti-Semitism dies hard. In fact, it doesn't die at all. It just keeps coming back with its libelous lies, refurbished, regurgitated over and over again. And I want to tell you something else. These anti-Semitic lies, they have consequences. In recent months, Jews have been assaulted in Canada, Australia, Britain, France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere. Here in America, an elderly Holocaust survivor was burned to death in Colorado. And a beautiful young couple from the Israeli embassy in Washington was brutally gunned down right in front of the Holocaust Museum there. Thankfully, President Trump's administration is forcefully fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism, and every government here should follow its lead. But instead, many do the opposite. They actually reward the worst anti-Semites on earth. This week, the leaders of France, Britain, Australia, Canada, and other countries unconditionally recognized a Palestinian state. They did so after the horrors committed by Hamas on October 7th. Horrors praised on that day by nearly 90% of the Palestinian population. Now, let me say that again. Nearly 90% of Palestinians supported the attack on October 7th. It's not supported only, they celebrated it. They danced on the rooftops. They threw candies. That's both in Gaza and in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, as you call it. And it's just the way they celebrated another horror, 9/11. They danced on the rooftops. They cheered. They threw candy. You know what message the leaders who recognized the Palestinian state this week sent to the Palestinians? It's a very clear message. Murdering Jews pays off. Well, I have a message for these leaders. When the most savage terrorists on earth are effusively praising your decision, you didn't do something right. You did something wrong, horribly wrong. Your disgraceful decision will encourage terrorism against Jews and against innocent people everywhere. It will be a mark of shame on all of you. But wait a minute, Mr. Prime Minister, they tell me. Wait a minute. We believe in a two-state solution. where the Jewish state of Israel will live side by side in peace with the Palestinian state. There's only one problem with that. The Palestinians, they don't believe in this solution. They never have. They don't want a state next to Israel. They want a Palestinian state instead of Israel. And that's why every time they were offered a Palestinian state, but were required to end the conflict with Israel and recognize the Jewish state, every time, over the decades, they turned it down. And that is why every time they were given territory, they used it to attack us. In fact, they effectively had a Palestinian state in Gaza. So what did they do with that state? Peace? Coexistence? No. They attacked us time and time again. Totally unprovoked. They fired rockets into our cities. They murdered our children. They turned Gaza into a terror base from which they committed the October 7th massacre. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The persistent Palestinian rejection of a Jewish state in any boundary is what has driven this conflict for over a century. It is still driving it. It's not the absence of a Palestinian state. It's the presence and existence of a Jewish state. And I find it amazing that the foreign chancelleries and the ministries and all those who pontificate about this, and the leaders, how can they not see this basic truth when it is repeated again and again and again ad nauseum? And I want to say something else. This rejection of a Jewish state not only applies to Hamas, it also applies to the so-called moderate Palestinian Authority. You should know that the Palestinian authorities pays terrorists to slay Jews. The more Jews the terrorists slay, the more the Palestinian Authority pays. The Palestinian Authority names its government buildings, its public squares, its schools, after the mass murderers of Jews, which they glorify as martyrs. They pay and glorify not just the killer of Jews, but also killers of Christians. Christians like Taylor Force, an American veteran who was brutally murdered in Israel by Palestinian terrorists. But, that I hear from the Western leaders. They tell me, the PA promised us it will reform. And I know this time, Prime Minister, it will be different. Yeah, right. We've heard these promises for decades. They always promise. They never deliver. Because you see, the Palestinian Authority is corrupt to the core. They haven't held elections in 20 years. They use the same textbooks as Hamas, exactly the same textbooks. They teach their children to hate Jews and destroy the Jewish state. And Christians don't fare much better. When Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, was under Israeli control, 80% of its residents were Christians. But since the PA took control, that number has dwindled to under 20%. These are the people you want to give a state to? What you're doing is giving the ultimate reward to intolerant fanatics who perpetrated and supported the October 7th massacre. Giving the Palestinians a state 1 mile from Jerusalem after October 7th is like giving Al-Qaeda a state 1 mile from New York City after September 11th. This is sheer madness. It's insane, and we won't do it. So here's another message to those Western leaders. Israel will not allow you to shove a terror state down our throats. We will not commit national suicide because you don't have the guts to face down a hostile media and anti-Semitic mobs demanding Israel's blood. And I want you to grasp something else, which is also distorted in the media. I say this not only in my name or the name of my government, but on behalf of all the people of Israel. Last year, there was a vote in the Knesset, our parliament, whether or not to oppose the imposition of a Palestinian state. You want to guess what the results were? Out of 120 members of our parliament, 99 voted against and only 9 supported. That's over 90%. It's not a fringe group. It's not the Prime Minister who himself is extreme or he's held hostage by extreme parties to his right. It's over 90% of Israelis. My opposition to a Palestinian state is not simply my policies or my government's policy. It's the policy of the state and people of the state of Israel. Western leaders may have buckled under the pressure. And I guarantee you one thing, Israel won't. Israel's victories over the Iranian... Thank you, I know you won't too, that's good. Israel's victories over the Iranian terror axis have opened up possibilities for peace that were unthinkable 2 years ago. Take Syria. For decades, the very idea of peace between Israel and Syria seemed unimaginable. Well, no more. Today, we have begun serious negotiations with the new Syrian government. I believe an agreement can be reached that respects Syria's sovereignty and protects both Israeli security and the security of the minorities in the region, including the Druze minority. From the founding of Israel, Jews and Druze have been brothers in arms. We have fought together, we've bled together, we built our lives together. When I was a young commander in Israel's Special Forces, my own life was saved by the invaluable advice given to me by a great friend, Salim Shufi, a heroic Druze IDF veteran. And that's why I couldn't sit idly by, nor could Israel sit idly by, while the Druze were being slaughtered by jihadists. And I instructed our forces to stop the massacre, which they promptly did. Peace between Israel and Lebanon is possible as well. I call on the Lebanese government to also begin direct negotiations with Israel. I commend it for its declared aim to disarm Hezbollah. But we need more than words. If Lebanon takes genuine and sustained action to disarm Hezbollah, I'm sure we can achieve a sustainable peace. Of course, until that happens, we will take whatever action we need to defend ourselves and to maintain the conditions of the ceasefire which was established in Lebanon. Our goal is not merely to monitor Hezbollah's actions, but to prevent them from violating the ceasefire and attacking us at any time. But I'm sure that if the Lebanese government persists in its goal of disarming Hezbollah, peace will come very speedily and very readily. Victory over Hezbollah has made peace possible with our two Arab neighbors in the north. Victory over Hamas will make peace possible with nations throughout the Arab and Muslim world. Our victory would lead to a dramatic extension and expansion of the historic Abraham Accords, which President Trump brokered between Arab leaders and myself 5 years ago. And I took note, as I'm sure you did too, of the encouraging words spoken here by the President of Indonesia. This is the country with the largest Muslim population of all nations. And it's also a sign of what could come. Forward-looking Arabs and Muslim leaders know that cooperating with Israel will provide them with groundbreaking Israeli technologies, including in medicine and science, in agriculture and water, in defense and AI, and so many other fields. I believe that in the coming years, the Middle East will look dramatically different. Many of those who wage war on Israel today will be gone tomorrow. Brave peacemakers will take their place. And nowhere will this be more true than in Iran. The long-suffering Iranian people will regain their freedom. They will make Iran great again. And our two ancient peoples, the people of Israel and the people of Iran, will restore a friendship that will benefit the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, the horrors that happened on one dark day, October 7th, those horrors happened countless times during the centuries of my people's exiles among the nations. Jewish blood was cheap. Jews were killed with impunity. We had to beg others to defend us. The rise of Israel did not mean that the attempts to destroy us would end. It meant that we could fight back against those attempts. And that is exactly what Israel has done since October 7th. Our sons and daughters fought like lions. Our brave soldiers donned their uniforms and rushed into battle. They were armed with the dreams of the 100 generations of Jews who came before them. The dream of living as a free people in the land of Israel, our beloved homeland for more than 3,000 years. The dreams of living in our own independent state. The dream of having an army to defend ourselves. And the dream of being a light unto the nations, a beacon of progress, ingenuity, innovation, for the benefit of all humanity. On October 7th, the enemies of Israel tried to extinguish that light. 2 years later, the resolve of Israel and the strength of Israel burned brighter than ever. With God's help, that strength and that resolve would lead us to a speedy victory and to a brilliant future of prosperity and peace. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Israel,
Speech from the United Nations General Assembly, the live speech of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. And now, the best thing that all of us can do for Israel, for the world in this situation, is pray. Let's pray for God to give wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders, to all the leaders that are involved in making decisions that affect our lives at the UN General Assembly in New York. Let's pray for peace agreements between Israel and its neighbors, Syria, Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, and even let's pray for Iran. Let's pray for the people of Iran to have better leadership than the regime that they have currently. God can make all of that happen. Let's pray for the IDF soldiers that are fighting in the Gaza Strip, risking their lives. And let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at